we've got excerpts from a really fascinating read, Phil Knight's memoir, Shoe Dog.
Ah, yes. A classic origin story.
Totally. It's
Yeah.
not just like a dry business history. It's super personal. All the messiness and, frankly, the fear involved in starting Blue Ribbon Sports, the company that became Nike.
Mm-hmm. So our mission today is really to walk through those early years,
Yeah.
using the text you've got for us, pull out the big moments, the people, the lessons, straight from his account.
Exactly. And it's a story that, as he tells it, is about, ambition, but also just sheer resilience, figuring out cultural divides, building this kind of unlikely team.
And facing obstacles that seemed completely impossible at the time.
It kicks off with Knight coming back to Oregon. He'd been away 7 years, and he describes this feeling of, well, strangeness. Being home, but not quite fitting in back in his parents' house.
Yeah, that part really stood out. Sleeping in his old room, looking at his childhood trophies, and having that thought, this is me, still. You really sense him grappling with like who he was supposed to be versus who he felt he was.
Yeah, wrestling with expectations, maybe feeling a bit stuck or needing to break out.
Definitely. And the book gets right into his motivation, which it's interesting. He thought it was wanting to win.
Right.
But then he corrects himself. He writes, no, that's not right. I simply didn't want to lose.
That's a subtle but huge difference, isn't it?
It really is. It wasn't chasing the glory. It was this deep-seated fear of failing that drove him. He talks about finding clarity in competition, right? That pulsing half second before winning and losing are decided.
Yeah, and running wasn't always to something.
It was just because stopping was terrifying. That refusal to quit seems, well, fundamental to the whole Nike story, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And it's out of that mindset, that need to just keep moving, that his crazy idea from Stanford really takes hold. Importing running shoes from Japan.
The one he presented in class.
Yeah, and he describes the reaction, formal boredom, like not a single question from his classmates.
Ouch. You could almost feel that, can't you?
Yeah.
Pouring your heart into an idea and getting crickets.
Total silence.
Yeah.
But crucially, the professor gave it an A. And Knight writes, he never really stopped thinking about that paper. So that one bit of validation...
It kept the spark alive.
Exactly. Then comes the big moment telling his father. He calls him Buck, his old nickname. And the text points out how his dad just skips right over the business part.
Right. Focuses entirely on the travel. Sees the trip as like a finishing touch to my education.
Which, kind of funny, ended up being exactly what Knight needed. His dad gave his blessing and his cash. That initial seed money.
Even if he didn't quite buy the shoe idea yet. A leap of faith in his son, maybe.
Seems like it. And speaking of family reactions, the book shares this really vivid, almost jarring story about his grandmother, Mom Hatfield. Her take on Japan was different.
Oh, yeah. That really grounds you in the time period. She apparently cried, saying, "Why, Buck, it was only a few years ago the Japs were out to kill us. Pearl Harbor." Talks about eye gouging.
Wow. It's such a powerful contrast, right? Her farm town, recent history perspective versus this global business trip he's planning.
It shows the massive cultural gap he was about to step into. Not just overseas, but like in his own backyard, too.
The text also brings in his travel buddy, Carter, described as someone who never did mess around. Always, see an open shot, take it.
The kind of guy you want on an adventure, maybe.
Apparently. Knight writes that Carter saw the itinerary and was just laughing with joy, with glee, wanted and immediately got a loan from his dad, too.
You see that shared entrepreneurial spark there. The book also mentions some earlier, less thrilling travel gigs.
Right, selling encyclopedias door-to-door in Hawaii. Not glamorous, to be sure, as Knight puts it dryly.
Sets up the scale of what he's attempting now, though. And those stops before Japan, Hong Kong, the Philippines, they weren't just sightseeing, were they?
No, not at all. He mentions the poverty in Hong Kong, feeling incomplete about China. And in the Philippines, this fascination with MacArthur, the whole warrior spirit, samurai, ideas that would kind of echo later.
Yeah, shaping his worldview before he even got to Japan. And when he does arrive, he notices this odd thing, how the war felt both present and, well, not present with the executives he met.
Like they'd put the war cleanly behind them.
He experiences moments of ki, the deep respect, and feels like a tycoon. Or tycoon, the Japanese word.
Which actually means warlord, right?
Tycoon. Well, quite a jump for a quiet guy from Oregon. The text really amps up the tension for that big meeting at Onitsuka in Kobe. He's nervous facing these guys who'd literally rebuilt their country.
You feel the pressure. He knows this isn't just another race. Everything depended on this meeting. And he shares the advice he got about doing business there. Don't be pushy. Aim for soft, sinewy talks. Understand the culture of indirection.
That's crucial, isn't it? The warning that no one says no directly. You can think you have a deal.
When you've actually been turned down politely, imagine navigating that.
High stakes. And the turning point, according to the text, he just holds up one of their shoes, a limber up, and says simply, this shoe, I can sell this shoe.
Just like that.
Just like that. And it worked. Got the sample order, the $50 money order. He describes feeling this instant connection. Partners. We were brothers.
Yeah.
Even across all those cultural divides.
Amazing. And he immediately writes home asking his dad for the $50. Then later needs $1,000 for the first real order, 300 pairs. And his dad's reaction is priceless.
What does he say?
Buck, how long do you think you're going to keep jackassing around with these shoes? Classic dad skepticism about the crazy idea.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
But despite that, the team starts forming. The book introduces these key people. First up, Bill Bowerman, his old track coach.
Ah, Bowerman. He sounds like quite a character. Brilliant, obsessed with shoes.
Totally obsessed. The text paints him as relentlessly focused on making shoes lighter, better. Always tinkering, experimenting. Apparently super demanding, too.
Yeah, he hoarded praise. Getting a simple, nice race after a huge achievement was like the ultimate compliment from him.
And there's that quote applied to him building his house by hand. The man who moves a mountain begins by carrying away small stones. That sums up his approach, right? Methodical, persistent.
Definitely. Then there's Jeff Johnson. Found through a friend, becomes the first full-time employee. Knight calls him somewhat misanthropic, which is interesting.
A bit of an oddball, maybe. But incredibly dedicated. Ran the East Coast sales. And his letters, Knight says they were anguished, always begging for shoes, for info.
Yeah, those letters become this running theme, highlighting just how chaotic things were, especially with supply.
So you've got Knight, the visionary, Bowerman, the mad scientist inventor, and Johnson, the dedicated, maybe slightly grumpy boots-on-the-ground guy.
That's the core, right. But the text makes it clear, Knight knew he needed stability, too. This shoe thing was still a gamble.
Right. So he gets a real job, becomes an accountant at Price Waterhouse, passes the CPA exam, becomes, as he puts it, officially and irrevocably a card-carrying bean counter.
It's such a weird split, isn't it? Chasing this wild dream on the side while doing, well, accounting.
He mentions learning a lot about business from a colleague, Hayes, nicknamed Uncle Remus, often in bars after work. And he's juggling this with Army Reserves duty, which he apparently hated.
Yeah, he hated it because he felt it was run like his bank.
Right.
Fight not to lose rather than fighting to win. He saw that as a surefire losing strategy.
And connects that directly to his frustration with the banks later on. The text also has that touching detail about Bowerman meeting Mr. Onitsuka.
Oh, right.
And them bonding over their war experiences. And how Onitsuka made his first shoe lasts using hot wax from Buddhist candles in the ruins after the war.
Just incredible resilience, a shared human connection beyond the business deal. Meanwhile, Bowerman's designs, like the Cortez, are taking off. Huge demand.
But then the problems of Onitsuka start piling up, right?
Yeah, the text spells it out. Shipping, wrong shoes, wrong sizes, models they didn't even order, prioritizing their Japanese customers.
And Johnson's letters are capturing the madness. That quote is amazing. Happiness is a boatload of Cortez. Reality is a boatload of Bostons.
With steel wool uppers, tongues made out of old razor blades, just paints a vivid picture of the frustration.
And on top of that, the banks. Wallace at First National, treating Knight like a deadbeat, refusing bigger loans even as sales are doubling every year.
It's like he's being punished for succeeding too fast. So this pressure cooker, bad supplier, reluctant bank forces a huge decision.
Got to find new factories.
Exactly. Which then sparks a massive legal fight with Onitsuka. Knight even worries in the text that things he did years ago, like sneakily looking in Kitami's briefcase,
Oh, right. He mentions that.
would come back to bite him, make him look guilty.
The deposition sounds rough. Badgered, baited, harassed, mocked.
He gets his cousin, Hauser, to take the case on contingency.
Because he can't afford the fees.
Right. And this young, fired-up lawyer, Strasser, joins them. Hauser says Strasser saw it as a holy crusade.
You probably needed that kind of energy. The trial itself sounds tense, Judge James the Just presiding, and that moment when Mr. Onitsuka says he knew nothing about cutting them off.
And Kitami claims he didn't know either.
And then they suddenly realize Kitami speaks perfect English the whole time.
Whoa, that's quite a courtroom revelation. But ultimately,
They won. He describes shouting, "We won!" Down the phone. Settlement offer was $400, but they managed to negotiate it up.
So the Onitsuka chapter closes, and now they have to launch their own brand, which becomes Nike. But the name, that was a struggle too. Knight's idea was Dimension 6. Apparently everyone hated it.
Dimension 6. Yeah, maybe not the catchiest.
So they go with Nike, the name Jeff Johnson dreamed up. Knight says they trusted Johnson's savant-like nature.
Nike. And then priority number 1, factories. Immediately.
The text introduces this guy, Soleil, says, I can solve all your problems. I know factories.
Sounds promising. Or maybe too good to be true.
Well, Knight takes this massive risk, pays their trading company, Nisho, for factory time without telling them it's to replace Onitsuka, and asks Johnson to move to Japan to manage it.
Wow. Paying up front for a secret plan. That's gutsy. The text really emphasizes the crazy growth then. Sales were doubling every year, like clockwork.
Just relentless, always pushing against those conservative bankers like Wallace. The philosophy had to be grow or die.
Constantly living on the float, as the book says. Using that gap between writing checks and the money actually clearing. Always right on the edge.
Which leads to that massive crisis in 1975. They owe Nisho $1 million, find themselves $75,000 short. Knight describes it as terrifying, the company's fate totally in the hands of others.
And the Nisho guys, Sumeragi and Ito, fly in. They figure out the missing check was just sitting on someone's desk.
Right.
An error.
Yeah, but the real kicker is Sumeragi's confession. He admits he'd been hiding invoices from his own bosses at Nisho.
Risking his own job.
To protect Blue Ribbon. Why? He says, Nike is my business child. It was personal for him.
That's incredible. That relationship, that loyalty saved them. Ito backs them up too, helps them ditch First National and Wallace. Ito calls the bank's approach such stupidity.
Finally free from that bank, but the money pressure didn't just vanish. Managing creditors sounds like chaos, like a Marx Brothers movie, Knight says.
He connects that feeling, that constant struggle, to runners like Prefontaine, that bleed-to-do-it mentality. Fighting bankers felt like racing Pre, maybe?
Yeah, fighting against anyone trying to hold them back. The book also gives us a glimpse into their team meetings, the butt-face meetings.
Right. The description is amazing. A guy in a wheelchair, a couple of morbidly obese guys, a chain-smoking guy.
Sounds like an interesting dynamic.
Totally. The text describes it as chaos, shouting, laughing, but somehow solving huge problems. They were scattered geographically, but came together for these intense sessions.
And it notes Johnson was different even then, often reading a book during the late-night stuff, maybe living up to that misanthropic label a bit.
Perhaps. The nicknames, too, Rolling Thunder for Strasser, Four Factor for Johnson, Doomsday, Wait. It shows this unique, tight-knit group. Knight uses words like camaraderie, loyalty, gratitude, even love.
It makes it really clear this wasn't just about spreadsheets. It was about people trusting each other through thick and thin.
And alongside the team and the finances, there's that constant push for innovation, like the error soul idea from Frank Rudy.
Knight's first reaction, comic book stuff. Skeptical.
But then they tested it, and suddenly this could be huge. And it wasn't just Rudy. The text shows Johnson gave key feedback, like putting air in the midsole, too.
Right, it was collaborative, although the first shoe with air, the Tailwind, actually failed at launch. Too many new things at once. Knight's lesson, don't put 12 innovations into one shoe.
But the key takeaway from the text is that failure didn't kill them. People still saw them as pushing boundaries. Then comes this massive curveball, the American Selling Price Rule, APS, an old trade law dug up by competitors like Converse and Keds.
And the bill, a retroactive demand for $25 million in duties.
$25 million, just out of the blue. That's existential, right? Knight says it felt like being at war with the United States of America. Massive lobbying effort starts, even meeting Senator Hatfield.
And their response, outlined in the text, is incredibly bold. Decide to American selling price ourselves by manufacturing in China.
A way to sidestep the rule and secure production. Talk about turning a crisis into an opportunity. The book points out the significance being the first American shoemaker in 25 years to go into China. It's a great example from the source of how immense pressure forced a radical, game-changing move. The memoir also gets philosophical about what business even means. It's not just profit for Knight.
No, he talks about it as creation, contribution, adding value, being part of the whole grand human drama. It's like redefining winning beyond just not losing. It's about building something.
Something meaningful. The text also covers going public. that whole dog and pony show for investors. He notes the weird mix, the professional pitch, but with his team haze called chronic unemployables.
Huh. And then the IPO happens. Suddenly, he's worth $178 million on paper. Just staggering.
A long way from borrowing $50 from his dad. The memoir blends these huge moments with really personal stuff, like how much his dad's pride in the swoosh meant, or buying a bigger house during the government fight as this act of, like, defiance or faith.
He includes these really evocative details, too, like finding those 9,000-year-old sandals in Oregon the year he was born.
Yeah, connecting himself to this ancient history of footwear.
Or remembering childhood moments of safety and donuts with Bump Hatfield, such a contrast to the chaos later.
The text doesn't skip the tough stuff either. Losing people like Bowerman, visiting Hayward Field, the law school named after his father, and facing public backlash later, being burned in effigy.
Right, feeling like a scapegoat, but also admitting, we could do better.
He even shares regrets misjudging people, athletes like Magic Johnson or Ryan Leaf. And the book ends with this strong, almost challenging thought about being an entrepreneur in America.
Constantly fighting trolls who live to block, to thwart. He says the hill has never been steeper, cites that study putting the U.S. behind Peru in entrepreneurial spirit.
Wow. So even after building Nike, the fight continues. That's quite the final note from the source, this epic journey built on grit and tame, but the landscape is still seen as this constant uphill struggle.
This deep dive into Shoe Dog's early years, it really hammers home that building something big is, well, it's messy. It's deeply personal, full of unexpected fights, and it takes a team that's bonded by more than just business goals.
And it makes you circle back to that initial motivation, doesn't it? Was it truly about winning in the end? Or was that relentless drive to simply not lose the real engine? And, how does that apply when you face your own big challenges?
Exactly. What's the piece that really resonates with you after hearing about this text? Is it the constant battle, the strange loyalty of that early team, the idea that business can be something more? Or maybe just that the fight never really stops?